Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Voice of the NONnation. And we're in. Today, I am one of your hosts, JPN. Welcome back. And joining me today is me, myself, and I. Gyp is on vacation, so you're going to be getting a JPN Hot Takes episode. We're going to go through some of the latest happenings in the crypto space this past week. I'll give you my steaming hot takes on them, and we'll see what you think about them. I don't have my voice of reason to keep me sane, so we're gonna dive right into it this week, and we're gonna start with our Ultrasound Money Minute. Our Ultrasound Money Minute, we are at ETH is at 1959. We've been hovering around there for the past week or so, actually. And gas, we've been above and below the ultrasound barrier this week. I think we're a little bit net deflationary on the week. You can see here on the 7-day, we're a little bit deflationary. There was some stuff that happened a few days ago. We'll get into that later. That sort of helped lead to that. But overall, a little bit net deflationary, and we can come down here and see what the usual suspects are on our burn leaderboard. And just like they have been for weeks at this point, Uniswap and the V2 router, both of them top burners. Then we got ETH transfers, Tether, new contracts. And we come down a little bit and we see the NFT marketplaces, OpenSea and Blur, are down there. We're going to get to why they're on here for the 7-day in just a little bit. But overall, hovering around the ultrasound barrier, a little bit deflationary, but things still looking good. And once again, if you sort of zoom out and look at what would happen if we were under proof of work still with ETH, we're inflating by 120 million ETH in a week, and instead we're down 1,000. Bitcoin over that week, printed more than 6,000 Bitcoin. So the effects of this are going to keep compounding. If you're not already onto that, we're going to continue to see this trend as it extends farther and farther, is going to start to have an impact. The difference between these curves of emission is going to be felt. Whether it's in a month or if it's in 6 months, etc. This transition is still slept on a little bit. The fact that new ETH is really not entering into supply; it's just sort of being recycled, and we're gonna see the impacts of that here real soon. So what contributes to this ETH supply? What has happened in the world in the past week? And we got a couple of stories we want to talk about. The first one, and I'm sure some people have heard about this, is Azuki's and the Azuki Elemental Mint. So what happened here is Azuki's is a NFT collection on ETH. They went ahead and this past week dropped a new collection. They were the Azuki Elementals, and it didn't go over very well, as you can kind of see from this tweet. The main collection was down 50% at the time of this writing, which is a couple days old post right now. I think it's down much further. The beans, with just some associated collection to the Azukis, down 50%. The elemental ones that had just dropped were pretty quickly, below mint price. I think mint price was 2 ETH. And in this screenshot, they're 1.4. I saw them as low as 0.8 the other day. So well below mint price. So why is that? What happened here? So the Azuki Elementals were, a supplemental collection, a second collection that was supposed to, expand the Azuki's NFT reach and expand, how many people could hold an Azuki. And I think it was supposed to be, some unique collection, follow the same art style, but have, fairly unique, and it should have been distinct from the original collection. Well, what happened was some of the elementals were near copy and pastes of the original Azukis. In fact, some sleuths were digging around and found, I think, a couple of examples where there were NFTs in the Elementals collection that were identical to ones in the main collection. Uh, and this, crashed the price of them. So Azuki's was a 10K project, I believe. Elementals was also another 10K project. So the supply for Azuki's effectively doubled overnight. There was very little distinction between the original ones and the Elementals, and things have crashed. And this this had a lot of long-term implications, at least short-term ones, for the broad NFT market space. We'll get into those, but this ultimately felt like a cash grab. And here's your first hot take: is this definitely felt like a way for the company behind Azuki. I think on this next one, on one of these other ones, it'll talk about who they were suing here. We'll get to that. But the creators of the collection, this definitely felt like a way for them to go ahead and capitalize on the high price of the NFT collection, rather than, just collect their share of the royalties forever. This was their attempt to go ahead and cash in on that high price. What they did was I believe, the details are a little fuzzy, but they basically allowed whitelist spots for people who held the Azukis, who held the beans, which again, I think are an associated collection to the Azuki. And the entire Elementals collection was sold to the current holders, which sort of went against one of the things they were saying. They were like, we're making another collection, the Elementals collection, to go ahead and expand the reach, expand how many people can have, an Azuki, expand their universe. They're writing an anime or something with it. But then they proceeded to sell the entirety of the collection to people who already held. So it reached no new people initially. They ended up getting, I believe it was 20,000 ETH. It was 2 ETH per mint for a 10K collection. 20,000 ETH, almost $40 million at the current market price, came directly from their holders, not new people. And then when the art was revealed to be almost the same, again, we see the price crash, and we're going to get into some of the implications that had. And one of the reasons it definitely looks like a cash grab, other than the obvious, they sold it to the people who already had it, taking advantage of the high floor price of the original collection. They took that money, they took all $40 million of it, the 20,000 ETH, and it was sent to Coinbase within a week. In fact, I think it was just a couple of days, and that money's out of the system and went to their pockets. Now they'll obviously have it, that team is going to have that money, but they kind of just took it all from the holders and cashed it out almost immediately. So it's not like that ETH exists in some sort of treasury that they can go ahead and use and do stuff. On chain, it is cashed out to the private team, and that's it. It's gone. But this mint had implications for the wider space, and it's part of the reason that Blur and OpenSea and some of these other NFT marketplaces are up there on the Ultrasound money board, and that's because as the price on the Azukis crashed, there was liquidations that occurred. And the reason liquidations occurred, and this is not a very, very new thing, but it's a relatively new portion of the space, is what is NFT lending, which is where you go ahead and you lend out your NFT for a certain amount of ETH at a certain percent. And I suppose it could be US dollar coins or whatever. But you basically try to cash in and take a loan against your NFT at a going market rate, essentially. The problem with this is if the floor price of a collection goes down to your liquidation price on the loan, your NFT gets put up for auction. And when they get put up for auction, there's bids, and the NFT lender is basically trying to get back how much you loaned out. Usually these occur at something like 80% health. So when you've borrowed 80% of the floor price or so, it triggers this liquidation. They go ahead and try to sell and get that 80% back. But this has a tremendous amount of sell pressure, and it can cause cascading liquidations, which is actually what we saw with some of these lending protocols for people who lend out Azuki's primarily, because their floor price crashed 50% over the course of a few days. But it also occurred for other collections. I think the Bored Apes, both those and the Mutant Apes, they saw pretty sharp declines. And there were a couple other collections that just got absolutely hammered because people who maybe had one good NFT or were loaning one NFT were loaning other NFTs. And I think it was 1,200 liquidations here, according to this tweet, in just a couple of days, which is quite a bit of sell pressure for some of these collections. Beans, again, that associated collection, 3% of the supply went through liquidations, which, again, a lot of sell pressure forcing the price down causes additional liquidations, and you get into this cascade until the bleeding stops. And you can see here, I think this is on Blur. Yeah, this is on Blur. But the Azukis and the Beans and some other ones are all under liquidation, and they have to go through this auction process. And it just, there was quite a bit of turbulence and quite a bit of, bear market sentiment in the NFT space here the past couple of days. They were hit particularly hard. And this brings me to the interesting point I wanted to talk about a little bit is it feels like the NFTs are going through their own cycle. It's offbeat from the rest of the crypto space. So we have, DeFi has sort of entered a bear market a while ago, and I think NFTs followed to some degree. But this particular event seemed to be really just focus on NFTs. They had, a lot of bearish sentiment the past couple of days, whereas the rest of the crypto space, Ethereum didn't budge very much, again, from that 1950 level. Other DeFi coins weren't seeing sell-offs. This was, isolated to NFTs. So it makes me wonder is if in the future we don't see the NFT space sort of have its own bull and bear cycle that might be somewhat independent of the larger market. And if they're just now entering, a very bearish time, are they going to have their bull market later on in the cycle than say the rest of the DeFi space, or when Ethereum decides to enter a bull market here? Is this trend going to continue? Are we going to see NFTs sort of be off cycle from the wider world of DeFi? That's going to be something interesting to take a look at here in the future. And the other thing I wanted to talk about this whole situation, before we get into the extra bit of drama, is what is a good distribution model for new NFTs to be made? So if there's a collection, how can you add to that collection without diluting down the people that are there? And I think there's a lot of room here to innovate. And in fact, I think some of that innovation can occur on the NONnation stack. So as you might be aware, NONnation has, an inflationary method. New coins are minted every day and they're sold into circulation, but it's done so at a very predictable, X number of coins per day leads, 8% per year. Could we see something similar with NFTs, where new NFTs are added to a collection at a predictable rate? I know a little bit of this has been done with Nouns DAO. They have a new, randomly generated NFT that goes up for auction once a day. But I'm wondering if this couldn't also be done, in say like quarterly sales, where, okay, every quarter, 1 to 300 new NFTs are added to a collection and sold as a small mint. And if you couldn't have something like that, where you can inflate the supply at a slow but predictable rate, and see, how that can grow a collection without these negative downsides that we're seeing right now with the Azukis, where the supply was effectively doubled due to the similar art within a day, and caused the 50% decline because the supply was suddenly much bigger than the demand for them, and so the price had to adjust accordingly. It'll be something interesting to see, and I'm very curious to see if someone can go ahead and build something again using the NONnation stack. We already have inflation mechanisms. We have automation when it comes to moving funds from a treasury. You could build something off of those where additional NFTs are minted every quarter, like we have the treasury splitter moving funds. Just have it be additional items are added to the collections here. It'll be something interesting to follow, and I think there's a lot of innovation that can be done in the space, because evidently just dropping out an entirely new collection doesn't have the desired outcomes, as we can see. And in fact, moving on from that just a little bit, there was an Azuki DAO was formed almost immediately after this botched mint and this botched drop. And the idea was to go ahead and hire a lawyer, sue the people behind the Azuki collection, and try to get them to buy back all the elementals or give reparations for the people. It's stupid. But it becomes stupider because there was a vulnerability in this DAO contract that they tried to hack together, which basically invalidated the whole thing. It's complicated, but they're basically trying to match a signature to. They're hashing a signature as a key, and that's a really bad way of doing it, because then once you have a signature, you can make another signature because it's the same hash. Don't do that. But this shows that if you try to hack together something on very short order with a contract like this, you can run into problems. And it's likely the developers of this contract didn't know. They just weren't experienced enough to know how to do this. I read some more things on this. You can just claim over and over with the same signature, because it never actually checks how many times the signature was used. This was a horrible contract because they tried to spin up something very fast to go ahead and do something. And this is another place where the NONnation gets to go ahead and step in, because we're going to have these factories for people to go ahead and create DAOs very quickly, but that are also secure. So you're going to be able to spin up a DAO for something like this, for the Azuki DAO, and say, okay, the Azuki NFTs are the voting tokens. You could go ahead and wrap them as a deck item. And the rest of the code, you don't have to worry about it. You can go ahead and spin that up really quickly and be able to manage funds to hire, say, a lawyer. So from the failed mint to whether or not the team behind them were trying to just cash in on the high value of their collection, to a failed DAO, I think the NONnation has a couple of ways that it can step in and address some of these shortcomings that we saw here in the NFT space this past week. From the ability to slowly inflate a supply, try different NFT token distribution models, to straight up being able to spin up DAOs very, very quickly that are also secure, is going to revolutionize the space. And it's going to make efforts like this, where I need something right now for token holders of whatever it is, whether it's an NFT collection or an ERC20, to go ahead, get that spun up, and get something to happen very quickly, where I have to manage MUNs and manage people. It's going to revolutionize that. And we keep seeing use cases where the stack can have an impact on how people are operating right now. But moving on from Azukis, we're going to talk about a follow-up to what we talked about last week with the Bitcoin ETFs. So we have Blackrock Again, we mentioned them the other week and maybe even the week before, but this is they refiled their Bitcoin ETF just recently, and this is because the SEC came back. They said there were flaws in the initial filings. They didn't give all the information they needed to give, and one of the big things was BlackRock came to an agreement with Coinbase so that Coinbase can be the one, I believe it's so that Coinbase is the one responsible for holding the Bitcoin and for surveilling the assets that are going to be traded in this ETF. So their big their big fix was saying, okay, Coinbase is the one that's going to be doing this. And this is where we come to hot take number 2 for the day. The initial filings didn't state their surveillance partner didn't state who was going to be custodying the assets here, which is, I believe, one of the big reasons it wasn't going to pass. But now they refiled, even though the first one wasn't technically rejected. This was some sort of amendment to the original one. But they named Coinbase. Coinbase is the one that they're going to be working with, which, as we've talked a little bit about more, and we'll actually talk about later in the podcast here, is Coinbase is the one who, for the U.S., is the most regulated, the clear choice, and the fact that BlackRock, someone with a lot of funds, who manages a lot of money, is going to be partnering with Coinbase here to have this agreement to go ahead and do the surveillance here, means that Coinbase still for the money in the U.S. is the agency that is the most advanced and the most well regulated when it comes to crypto, and it just makes the SEC lawsuit against them even more laughable. Seeing that again, big money is coming into work with Coinbase when it comes to pushing crypto forward for this mass adoption through ETFs and other things. But the hot take that I have about this is it was purposely not stated in their first filings, and I have to wonder if Coinbase wasn't actually the first option, and might still not be the first option. There was someone else, recently, just months ago, in the United States, who was buddying up to regulators, who was buddying up to other money, who had a crypto exchange in the Bahamas, who might have been, the preferred partner before things went south, and that was SPF and FTX. I have to wonder if maybe FTX was going to be the one that they were going to look at for this surveillance agreement until things went belly up. And with the relaunch, the FTX 2.0 that they're pointing out, and they're saying is going to launch in quarter 3 or quarter 4 of this year, which is anytime now. We are in quarter 3. I have to wonder if maybe they were waiting to see if they could get FTX, that maybe those relationships that they had with people at FTX, that they were going to try to use those. But since FTX went up, they've had to turn to Coinbase instead. So the hot take here is FTX might have been the preferred partner before FTX went belly up. Hot take. Let me know what you think in the comments. We'll talk about it more on Friday. But anyways, again, they're going with Coinbase, and we're gonna see, how things progress in terms of these Bitcoin ETFs. BlackRock, I think, is one of the first to refile, but there's a couple of others that are going to refile and likely also name Coinbase. So again, big for Coinbase. They're the ones that money's going to turn to here right now to push crypto to mass adoption, to mass mass financial adoption, at least when it comes to investing. And speaking of Coinbase, our final topic here for today is an update on the Coinbase SEC lawsuit. So SEC sued Coinbase, said you're issuing securities, stop it. Coinbase just last week filed their reply. And in their reply, they cited the big cite in theirs was the major question doctrine, and we'll get into that. But in their reply, they basically asked the court to throw out the lawsuit. And they give some other replies and defense, but the big news is they went for this case should be thrown out immediately. And it's under what's known as the major questions doctrine. And this gets into US law, but this is a new-ish doctrine and precedent by the courts where that basically says if an agency isn't explicitly given authority over something and Congress is debating legislation on that thing, then the agency does not have jurisdiction over it. And this was it was for, I think, the Secretary of Education and they were going after student loans. And as Coinbase's chief legal officer points out, if you go ahead and say, the chair of the SEC instead of secretary and digital assets instead of student loans, we're in the same place. And that's because the SEC was never given explicit, jurisdiction over digital assets other than Bitcoin. He points out other than Bitcoin. And currently in Congress, there's pending legislation to go ahead and regulate cryptocurrency. So the major question doctrine basically says, since Congress is actively trying to look for legislation and dish out regulation to another agency, that the SEC hasn't been given explicit jurisdiction over the digital assets. And so the SEC cannot sue for violation of things that they don't have jurisdiction over. It's a little bit complicated, but this is a very bold move by Coinbase, and it is a bold opening move for them. They're coming out and saying, hey, this thing should just be thrown out. Before we have to get into the weeds and fight it, they did give defense already as part of their reply. But they're saying, we don't even have to go into all of that. The major question doctrine says that this whole thing should just be thrown out now. Once Congress passes legislation on it, gives the SEC, and they'll likely give the SEC's jurisdiction over it, then we can come back to this. But until then, throw it out. This has no place being in court. So bold move. And if it pays off, this would save Coinbase from going through a long, lengthy legal battle with the SEC. This would shut it down very, very quickly. And again, we see money coming and partnerships coming with big money in the U.S. backing Coinbase. They're going to be taking a financial interest in how Coinbase does here and seeing Coinbase succeed. So the fact that they're coming out with a strong opening move, that money's coming in, that people are partnering with Coinbase for Bitcoin ETFs, makes me, again, as I've been for a while, but very, very certain that Coinbase is going to fight this, fight it well, and come out clean on the other side. That looks like where things are going to be happening. And again, there might be some small things that they admit for. I know in the past people have talked a little bit about how staking's run. They might have to take pay some penalties for how staking is done through their app, but likely in large, the SEC lawsuit doesn't hold up. So we'll see. We'll continue to bring you updates on that as it comes out. But now, for your thoughts, what do you think? what other methods of, inflating an NFT supply do you have? Can we build something on the NONnation stack to inflate NFTs, to go ahead and spin up these NFT DAOs, to hire lawyers? Maybe you even have a custom default with the NONnation where you can spin up an organization that just looks to hire a lawyer to sue. It's a small use case, but it is a use case. What do you think about the Blackrock ETF, them partnering with Coinbase? What do you think of Coinbase's reply? Do you think this bold opening move is going to go ahead and pay off for them? We'll find out, and we'll keep you updated. As it comes for team events for the week, there's a big one coming up on Thursday. It is going to be an old school AMA with Ale and Vasa. They are going to be in Discord answering all of your questions. So if you're not already part of the NONnation Discord, now is a great time to go ahead, get in there, ask them questions for their old school style AMA. And we'll see you Thursday, and I will see you Friday to discuss what you think about my steaming hot takes on Azuki's and on BlackRock partnering with Coinbase. Well, have a good weekend, everyone, and I will see you soon.